go fucking see it. Okay, if you want me to go a little more in depth about it. This review is going up a little bit later because I wanted a chance to do a second viewing. The first time I saw it, I had the same general impression as I did the second time, but we were a little bit late and it was a little busy, and by a little I mean a lot. We ended up sitting in the very, very front row, which meant that we were sitting there watching the whole movie like this. So I understandably left with a little bit of a headache. I wanted to have a second viewing just because, and also I wanted to see if having a healthy distance away from the screen would help me to maybe notice things that I didn't pick up on before. If any of you have been following this movie, and I'm sure many of you have for various reasons, you know that this movie is all anyone is ever is talking about right now. And for good fucking reason. It's standing at like a 97 or 98. It's really high on Rotten Tomatoes right now. A lot of action movies like to boast that they're non-stop action all the way through, adrenaline pumping. This is like, they're exaggerating though. This is literally a non-stop action movie. They take the first few minutes to kind of set up, you know, who's who and where is what place, and then once the action gets going, it never actually really stops. The few pauses it has is more to just give you a breather. And trust me, those few moments where it pauses will go by like that. Because before you know it, we're back and being chased again. I got a lot of Dread flashbacks. To back when Dread first came out. It was a very balls to the wall, no holds barred, straight up action movie that bucked a lot of Hollywood conventions, and very much so the same with Fury Road. The story is once it actually unfurls, is actually kind of familiar. Without giving away the whole thing, because I think that you should go into this with knowing as little as possible. You could have called this movie Mad Max and the Search for Dryland, and it would have been pretty much the same story. Now, something I want to get out of the way really quick is when you're talking about something that's a reboot or a sequel or anything like that, you gotta make it known where you stand on the previous movies. I've seen 2 of the other 3 Mad Max movies, one of them recently, the other Beyond Thunderdome. It's been so long. I remember Master Blaster, and I remember there was a song. We don't need another hero. If you don't know jack shit about the Mad Max movies, you can still go see Fury Road and completely get your money's worth out of it. Like, I speak no hyperbole. This is gonna be the movie to beat this summer, like already. We've barely gotten into spring and this is already gonna, like, this has set such a high bar for this coming summer season of movies to beat. I can already tell that this is gonna be in my top 3 of the year, if not number 1. Going down the scheduled list of what's gonna come out this year, I don't know that anything has a chance. I mean, I'm open to being pleasantly surprised, but this just to give you an idea of what the kind of impact this movie had on people and on me. Not only is the action non-stop, but it's so visceral and real. There's so much, everywhere you look, it is just pure imagination. In the Star Wars prequels, they were bragging about how the frames were all so dense and how there's so many things going on at once. And they were bragging about it like it was something to be proud of, but when you went and saw the movie, it was an overload to your senses. You couldn't make heads or tails of what was going on. There was so much happening at once you couldn't focus. Here, it's very much the same thing. Everywhere you look, there's something going on, but there is always, amongst the midst of it, there is always a focal point to the action. There is always a main thing of what you should be looking at. George Miller knows what he's doing. This is the same guy that did the other Mad Max movies. Fun fact, he also did Happy Feet. George Miller's gotta eat too, guys. But because of that experience, he knows how to draw your attention to the point where it should be. There's always some time to admire what's going on in the background. When I say there's imagination, I mean just like the world that this movie builds and presents. There's never any huge exposition dumps. No one sits there and does a huge flashback of everything that happened, because you don't need to know everything that happens. It's a movie that's purely focused on what it needs to do. But going back to the action, when I said that it was non-stop, visceral, and real, I very much mean, I can't emphasize enough the word real with the action. Because there is so little, I mean, obviously they use some CG. You can't actually have actors driving into a sandstorm without raising some insurance issues. But every bit of action in the movie what you're seeing take place actually happened when they filmed it. When you see a dune buggy like shooting off a ramp at 55 miles an hour with 3 guys hanging on the doors of the car and then lands, that actually happened. Like they probably were harnessed in to a certain degree, but they were still really on there. All these stunts and chases and explosions, cars flipping, people running on cars, people riding on the sides of cars, people standing on cars, jumping off of it. There's so much going on, and it's all happening. This movie gives jobs to so many stunt doubles that probably got really badly hurt. I mean, there's some times where you can tell they obviously had to CG in like a body double because they hit the ground and they float kind of weird. But there a lot of times when you look and like there's a crash, you see somebody like trying to flip and it's pretty painful. All this action has actual like heft to it. There's actual weight going on because, I mean, there's meaning to what they're doing. Primarily, solely just because of the characters. The characters are so well established very quickly, very early on, so you can get right into it. Charlize Theron playing a character named Furiosa. If that isn't the most fucking badass thing I've seen all year. I'm very determined, headstrong, willing to do whatever it takes just to survive, because this world that you dive into when you see this movie is very harsh. You're gonna see a lot of stuff on screen that you're not totally comfortable with. You've got this villain, Immortan Joe, something like that. You've got this villain with like demon white hair, and he has a mask to help him breathe, but it's not enough to just have a mask. He has to have the mask have like teeth, which opens at some point when he's really mad. I don't get how the mask opens, but fuck it. He's got this army of war boys who he's got like a cult. He's got them completely convinced that if they serve him in battle, if they die for him, that they'll ascend to a higher plane of being. You know, as long as they die in a greater service of something, that they'll go on to they live, they die, and live again. They'll go on to this greater existence where all these rewards wait for them. And of course, you got Tom Hardy, Bane, the man himself. Ironically in a mask for a good portion, like a face cover for a good portion of the movie. So how does he compare to Mel Gibson and the others? Obviously that's completely subjective. Some people are going to prefer Mel Gibson, who puts a little bit more emotional heft into the character. Some people are going to really admire Tom Hardy's ability to pick up on the character's quirks, little like and grunts, all the way he kind of talks in the other movies. He picks up on it really well. Another thing though is that Max himself does not actually have a whole lot, in terms of an arc, he doesn't have a whole lot to do. He's kind of along for the ride with the movie. And some reviews that you'll look at and see are pitching this as a bad thing. The thing is that I don't think that these people have actually like really paid much attention to the other Mad Max movies. In the other movies, it's almost always another character narrating the movie as you're going along. It's someone else telling stories about Max. He's never been really a huge hero. He kind of gets told what to do a lot. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Again, if you want to go with the Dredd analogy, Dredd in that movie very much, he didn't really have an arc. He didn't really learn anything. He was there to do his job. The character was established early on. It was an enjoyable character, and that's all he really needed to be. It's more about what goes on around him and how the world responds to his presence. And then you had Anderson, his female partner, who actually changed throughout the course of the movie. And that very much so is kind of the same thing with Mad Max. Max, again, is just kind of along for the ride, and you just kind of see the world reacting around him. And then it's Furiosa, Theron's character, who has to learn and grow and is faced with challenges that she has to overcome. Not that Max isn't looking for redemption either, or having some kind of a motive of any kind, but it's in the background. The characterization is so good within the context of the movie and in like the portrayal of the actors that there are characters with no lines whatsoever, and you just see them doing something or doing a thing, and immediately they stamp a memory in your brain. Like, you are always going to remember that guy or that girl or that character for whatever reason. The one everyone is loving right now is Rock Rider, who I'm not going to, again, you should have already seen this movie, but on the off chance you haven't, I don't want to spoil Rock Rider for you. Before we drift away from that, though, I'm surprised that there's a lot of articles floating around of people who are like, oh, did you know that he wasn't CG? And I'm just kind of like, Did you not know he wasn't CG? Wait, did I do that right? I don't know, it just seems very obvious that amongst all the other real stuff going on in the movie, he very obviously exists. He's right there. Let me rephrase that. The characterization is so good in the movie that the cars feel like characters in and of themselves. They are all so uniquely well put together. Again, the imagination. You really get the feeling that these cars are hunks of crap just kind of strung together with whatever they could find. I prefer that way better than in like something like in Fast and the Furious, where cars are like their superpower. I mean, I get the appeal of the Fast and the Furious movies. It's not appealing to me, but I get the appeal of shiny, smooth, fast cars doing cool shit. I just prefer to see something I haven't seen before, or that I can't see in real life. Now, if you know me, I'm always looking for ways to progress and move forward and learn from every experience. And to do that, we have to do a little bit of critical thinking, a little bit of constructive criticism. So, bearing that in mind, let's be a little open-minded and do a little constructive criticism about Mad Max, the things that didn't quite work in general. That I mostly noticed the second time around. There's a group of female characters that you meet very early on, not the ones later on, but there's a group of female characters you meet very early on. I mean, I get their role, I get where they place in the movie. They're not very good actors. Just in general, not that they're given that much to do, but when they're sitting there rambling on, like, there's a scene where they're arguing back and forth with Nicholas Hoult, who plays one of the war boys in the movie.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
They're arguing with him, and it's something about it just seems, I couldn't decide between if it was cheesy or just kind of amateur. And if you don't agree with me there, that's fine, but later on there's another scene that takes place at night. By the way, they do the 80s thing. There's so many 80s like editing styles in the movie. They actually do the thing from the 80s where covering the screen with a blue filter means it's night. It's the exact same thing. But there's a whole scene that takes place at night where they're being chased by the Bullet Town leader. That probably means nothing to you that have not seen the movie. They're being chased by a villain in a tank, and that entire scene just completely... It was weak the first time I saw it. Watching it a second time, it really just doesn't work. Ironically, I was praising like the cinematography earlier, but the main reason I think that scene didn't work is because of the way it was filmed, the way it was shot. You know, they're being chased by this bad guy, the bad guy's shooting at them, but every time the camera backs up and pans out and you see where they're at, you see the bullets hitting the ground where they're at, but you don't see the bad guy anywhere. So it's very disconcerting. Like, I don't understand where things are in relation to each other, which in action is really, really important. A lot of the acting in that scene relies on that same group of girls from before, especially the white-haired one who I don't even think was awake when she said her line. She honestly looked like she was sleepwalking. A line that was supposed to be genuinely concerning, she just delivers it so flat and I don't care. The bad guy that's chasing them in general does things like he stands on the roof of his car and just like is screaming some kind of verse or something that he made up, and there's cheesy drama music going on in the background, and he's just shooting blindly. Just the whole scene, just a bunch of little things adding on to each other that just doesn't really work. I think the whole thing could have been redone a lot better. Also, there's kind of a subplot of this commodity called mother's milk, which I won't go too into now, but at first it just seems like kind of one of those things that they throw in there to establish, the kind of world that they live in, but they keep bringing it up a couple different times throughout the movie. You think it's going to go somewhere, like it's going to have some kind of importance, or maybe they'll elaborate on it, but they never do. It just kind of feels like a drop-tot rock that they didn't know what they picked it up before they knew what they were going to do with it, then figured, oh, there's nothing I could do with this, and then got rid of it later. I don't know, it just seems a little weird. Also, important to note, the second time I saw it in 3D. Whether you see it in 2D or 3D, honestly, doesn't really matter. The 3D doesn't really add anything special to the experience, but it's also really well done 3D. Nothing looks too harsh, nothing's too sharp or edged. Edged, that's a real word. It was very obviously filmed in 3D. It was intended to be that way, and it's not some kind of like a cheap conversion like it was with Airbender or the Clash of the Titan movies. So if you're curious or if you like 3D, spending the extra money to kind of help kickstart a sequel would definitely not be out of line. It definitely does well, but if you are worried that you're going to miss anything by going to a normal 2D showing, you're not going to miss anything. I think there should be some kind of a donation drive or something like that for when cars get wrecked or destroyed. You can just donate them to George Miller for his next Mad Max movie instead of like just sending them to the pound or something like that. You can just donate them straight to him so he doesn't have to buy more cars to just destroy, get a sequel done that much faster. I guess like final thought is that the action movies so far this year goes Age of Ultron, Kingsman, Fury Road. Do you need any other explanation? Do you need to elaborate? I walk out of Fury Road, this movie with loads of action that's really well done, really well shot, all has emotional heft to it, great characterization, flows flawlessly, and I walk out of this movie and I think to myself, is this how teenagers feel when they walk out of Transformers? Is this how everyone else feels when they went to see Transformers? But the difference is talent. Talent makes all the difference. So yeah, if you just want to see what a good action movie actually looks like and what it can be, and not just, well, then by all means, put your money towards Fury Road. Give it 2 hours. Let it take you for a ride. I don't care if you haven't seen any of the Mad Max movies, you've seen them all, whatever. Honestly, it's worth your time. Go into it blind if you want. Everything, it's self-contained. You don't need to know anything extra. It's always weird reviewing good movies because then I don't have any many jokes to write or make fun of the movie with. I don't even really know how to end the review. It's a lot harder to talk about good movies than bad movies. But that's depressing.